Hey everybody, this is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Yak with Mac. Today we got to speak to Senior Director of Learning and Talent Development, Barb. We got into the day of learning and all of the tools and resources out there for leaders. Listen in. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back again. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Yak with Mac. And I told you so. I told you we would have some inspirational guests coming up. And the lady that you're looking at, I'm sure will look very familiar to a lot of you, but we're going to really get to know her today because on the days when you see her, it's totally not about her. She never makes it about her, but we're going to make it about her today. So I want to get right to it. I would like to introduce the Senior Director of Learning and Talent Development, Barb Schlittenhart, to the podcast today. Barb, welcome. It is so fantastic to have you.
Kenny, I appreciate it. It is great to be here. Love what you do for T-Mobile, and thank you. I'm humbled to join your podcast today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And without you, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. So thank you. But I tell you, there are just really the day of learning is just so spectacular to me and to anybody who gets into that. And I really want to talk about that in leadership with you today. But first, I think it's so important that people hear a little bit more about you because I think, again, most people, if they walked on the campus there, they would recognize you, but they don't really know the background of Barb. So I'd love to hear about your career journey, and you can go back as far as or as short as you'd like, um, and maybe talk a little bit about some lessons that you've learned along the way.
Absolutely. All right. So, Kenny, I'm going to take us back a little bit. I'm going to start with where I grew up. I grew up on a farm in Centralia, Kansas, northeast part of the state. And I share that because a lot of who we are as individuals resonates from our upbringing and the experiences that we've had. And that's where I got my work ethic, my values, teamwork, leadership. My parents had 5 kids in 7 years, so you can bet we were
Wow.
figuring out how to work as a team at a very young age. If I wasn't going to school, if I wasn't working, we didn't have a lot of money, so we had to earn our keep, if you will. I was playing sports and loved sports, so I was fortunate to earn a college scholarship and pay my way through college at Fort Hays State University playing basketball. And while I was there for the 4 years, I was a part of a national championship team. Again, learning lots of life lessons from work ethic to teamwork, leadership, and values. And one of the things that I always share is our national championship team was one of those teams when you think back, what's a team that was like just the best team? We had trust, we had each other's back, we felt like a sense of belonging and inclusion, and that was that team. Okay, fast forward, I graduated, got an accounting degree. I went and worked my first job in a CPA firm. And, that first year out of college, Kenny, it is a difficult transition to say the
Yes.
least.
Yes, no
And,
doubt.
and, and that was me. I was trying to find myself. I had to say, you know what? It's okay not to be okay. I was like, what have I just went to school for? And I do not love my job. I believe things happen for a reason. And I got a call while I was working at the CPA firm from Fort Hays State University, and they said, we are in need of a graduate assistant basketball coach for the women's team.
Wow.
Have you ever thought about going back for your master's degree?
Uh-huh.
And I actually, over that year, had been to the library of the local university because, we didn't have a lot of computers back then, reading and accessing stuff, trying to figure out what else I could do. So I took the opportunity. I went back to school. I got a master's in sports administration. I gave back to the sport that I love and learned additional leadership skills and coaching skills along the way. Now, I also, back to the everything kind of happens for a reason. One day, while I am in the athletic office, there's a fax that comes across the fax machine and it says internships at the United States Olympics Center in
Oh, wow.
Colorado Springs. And I was like,
Wow.
well, that sounds interesting. And back then we had faxes where that's how you communicated. So
Yes.
I applied, I got the internship, and so not only did I get experience in a college setting, I did an internship with the United States Olympic Committee. I volunteered for the '96 Olympics, and I share all of that because it does play into kind of my career journey and what I've done over the years. Fast forward, moved to Kansas City, didn't have a big network, didn't really know a lot of people, became the first employee of the Women's Intersport Network, which is a part of the Kansas City Sports Commission. And we were out in the community just promoting the value and health of women who are active and participating in sports. During that time, I was there for 2 years, got to participate in the women's Final Four that was in Kansas City that year in
Wow.
'98.
Wow.
And I walked out of that role after 2 years of not knowing really anybody in Kansas City and had the biggest network of friends and family from all the volunteers that participate in a nonprofit. All right, now I'm going to get to my T-Mobile career. I left the nonprofit, the sports commission. I wanted to progress, and I wanted to progress faster than the nonprofit was progressing.
Hmm.
And then I thought about transferable skills. How do you take transferable skills and move them into corporate America? So I found a college recruiter position at then Sprint, now T-Mobile, and I was a referral from my sister who works for the company as well, and I applied and got the job. 23 years later, and here
Wow.
I am.
Wow.
Now, within T-Mobile, I would tell you I never expected stepping into that college recruiter job, being here 23 years later. But I would describe for me, my career here has been more like exploring a mountain. I wouldn't call it climbing a mountain, but more exploring a mountain. I've spent a third of my career in recruitment, in that talent acquisition, everything from individual contributor project management to managing teams and executive recruiting. Then I spent a third of my career doing HR business partner, relationship management, employee investigations, helping drive, management quality across the organization. And then the last third plus, it's actually been more than a third, I've been in the learning and development and career development space, and I have to tell you, I've found this is kind of like all the things that happened in my career and coaching and sports and leadership, and has all kind of really, I'm able to do that at T-Mobile in a learning and development area. Now, the lessons that I learned along the way, because there were many, and I had some great, mentors and advocates I didn't even know I had at the time. One of the things that I learned was say yes before you're ready. There
Wow.
were positions that were presented to me, and I was like, I don't have that experience. I don't have that knowledge. Say yes before you're ready. Another one is just give, play the role that you want to have in the organization, so that you aspire to. Uh, I often say, what's, in sports analogies, um, if you want more playing time, what's the best way to get more playing time? Make it really hard for the coach to take you off the court.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
if you want a leader role, a people manager role, start performing that way in your current role. And there's always ways that you can do it if you look for it. So that was one of the things. And then um, be open to learn, say yes to learning every day. And then lastly, and I learned this by a mentor, is share your interest, share your aspirations. Nobody can read your mind. If you aren't communicating what your interests are, you're leaving it up to somebody to come up with that for you, and they can't read your mind. Um,
Yeah.
so
Wow.
yeah,
Wow. Wow. And that, what a journey. I'm so glad you went all the way back to your roots. That's great. And you had me at basketball, by the way, because yeah, I love sports, and I never knew that about you. That is just fantastic. And those last three pieces of advice are just spectacular. And um, the one that really stands out for me is say yes before you're ready, because I always hear a lot of people, no, I'm not ready to apply for that. No, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Well, you can grow into the job. I mean, there is such a thing. I love that. But I do want to go back to one other thing that you said, though, that I jotted down. You mentioned transferable skills. Could you talk a little bit more about that? What's an example of that? On the all employee meeting, Deanne King got a very interesting question about, how someone who might be in retail right now, but maybe aspire to go into network and engineering but has no clue how to get started. And I thought she answered it great. And I don't know that she said specifically transferable skills, but that's exactly what I was thinking about. Talk a little bit more about that for a few seconds.
Yeah, transferable skills, you often hear it called adjacency skills
Mhm.
as well. And for me, being in a nonprofit, I did project management work. I did a lot of public speaking and presentations. I did a lot of recruiting for volunteers. And so transferable skills just meaning thinking about, well, maybe I've not done recruiting at a corporation, but I recruited college athletes to the university to play basketball. Maybe I haven't done, project management in a formal corporate setting, but I can learn. I've been applying it on, I've been doing it with what skills I have. So transferable skills, just in terms of that and adjacency skills, there's a lot of analytics, big data, machine, AI analytics now that can really help you understand more of your transferable skills. And we're looking at ways we can make that even easier for employees to understand. Individuals, one example, who have a lot of analytics, data, more of your finance type positions, have transferable skills into cybersecurity, which we know is a growing industry.
That is fantastic. And what priceless advice that is, because I would imagine that sometimes in that moment of truth during an interview, right, where someone may say, well, you're a store manager. Why did you apply to be a network engineer? Well, let me tell you a little bit about why I applied and some of my transferable skills. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm
And when
glad
you can,
we're,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I'm glad we're working on things that leaders can actually look at that and help them along during the interview process.
Yeah. Yeah. And as an employee, being able to articulate it as well.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Wow, that is fantastic. Well, I loved hearing about your career. I want to get to Day of Learning, and I first want to ask you because I do want to get into uh, why folks don't take advantage of it a little bit more, and what are some things that can really help leaders, especially with Day of Learning. But how did Day of Learning actually come about? What was some of the things that was your thought process as you were starting to put this together? And it's grown just tremendously each and every time. But how did this manifest? How did it actually come about?
Well, Kenny, it definitely was out of those big brainstorm sessions where you're just kind of trying to figure things out. But then, it kind of comes together when you least expect it. Solving a business problem where leaders were constantly looking for how do I develop certain skills that were critical at that moment? We all know things are going on right now. We've got a lot of change. Sievert talked a lot about change in the all employee meeting this week, and all of a sudden, change management bubbles up, and then everybody's off, a million different directions trying to come up with how do we bring change management to the table. One example. So, we were just trying to say, how can we make it easy for leaders and employees to work on power skills, those softer skills, perhaps, right? Work on power skills that are most critical and relevant right now. How can we make it easy so that our employees, our leaders don't have to try to figure it out? How can we bring the conference, if you will, or bring what's most relevant to T-Mobile? So oftentimes we leave, we go to external conferences, which are awesome. I promote those as well. But if we could bring it to T-Mobile and then curate what's priorities, power skills, and provide simple and easy resources and tools so that they can work it into their schedules. time is the biggest barrier to learning.
Mm,
And so we wanted to address the time, and we wanted to address the critical skills at the same time. So that's how we came up with, well, then let's dedicate a day of learning so that we're prioritizing the time. Let's build the conference so that the sessions are um, condensed. They're not, so they're 45 minutes
yeah.
keynotes. Think about how long it takes to read a book. It's are essentially reading an entire book, but getting it in 45 minutes.
Yes.
In addition to that, if you don't have 45 minutes, we have podcasts that we've also produced with the keynote speakers. They are 5 to 10 minutes. And then the last piece that we've added to the day of learning is leader guides. And I think this is the best kept secret. And
Yes.
so you mentioned we need, how do we get more people knowing about day of learning and participating in day of learning, not just during the day, but all year long, and going back and using that resource. One idea, I may need to get a stretch assignment person for marketing to help us, and just to help us break through with that. But let me just tell you, on right now, leaders, employees, we're all looking at our voice survey results.
Hmm.
And I can guarantee you there's a topic where you're going to want to create some type of an action plan to improve that. We have some amazing resources in Day of Learning that will help you. Innovation, change, growth mindset, unconscious bias, leadership, resilience, and grit. The leader guides make it they make you look brilliant as a leader because they they give you an agenda, they give you questions to ask. You've got the podcast, you have the day of learning keynote, you've got the resources there to have fun, do a summit with your team, and then make it your own as well.
Wow.
So
Yeah. So I'm hearing there's really no excuse that we shouldn't have any excuse of taking advantage of these because, and you know this, I lead a team of trainers, so none of them were able to join during the actual day, but they've all watched all three at other times, and so, and we went through the leader guide is spectacular because that if you're struggling, hey, I just watched Risha Grant and now what, right? What do I say? Hey, what'd you guys think? No, you lay it right out there for us, which is fantastic.
yeah, and the intent, back to the time, the biggest barrier. What problem are we trying to solve? That time to learn critical skills. The leader guide's intended to just be used in a lead meet, a team meeting that you have every week,
Yes,
and just integrate it into your, regular routine is the concept and the vision.
that's awesome, Barb. You touched on this a little bit. I wanted to ask you about this a little bit more though, because I'm amazed how timely the topics have been each and every time you've done this. And it's got to be a little bit more than brainstorming. Is it looking also at the surveys? How do you come up with the topics? Because they seem to be so timely as to what we as a company or we as leaders might be struggling with at that moment. And boom, there it is, right there. How do you come up with the topics?
First, Kenny, I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my team who
Yes,
puts on Day of Learning, and they, it is rewarding, but it is work.
yes,
And there are things that don't go right, and trying to figure it out, and time, you know, constraints. So I want to give a big shout out because they are what makes this work. But from a how do we get that alignment to what's relevant right now, but you just shared with the Our Voice survey results is one of the inputs we absolutely use. We we review what's going on in our voice survey, the trends, the insights there. We have a network across T-Mobile, across our learning and development team. So we also get feedback and test what's going on in consumer group and T4B and marketing and technology. We utilize our HR partners that also are working with our senior
Mm,
most leaders and the
mhm.
conversations that they are having. And then we also look at our strategy. Where are we headed from a strategy standpoint? T-Mobile, what are some of the upcoming carrier type what's on the forefront from a strategy standpoint that can also help propel us forward. So it's like a Tetris game. We put all the piece parts together. We then get to, okay, here's like 4 or 5 prioritized topics, and then we start betting what that could look like, and to end up with our lineup for the day.
Wow. It is, and so I'm just going to give one more plug here, and then I want to ask you something else. The you're not because then you have to find speakers that line up with the topic, and it's just so I would imagine that's a lot of hard work as well. But what is amazing is that you're not talking about topics that were relevant in the 80s or the 90s. They're relevant today, and they're important for us today because our work culture is changing so much. And it's almost like you and your team. Shout out because I know most of your team or a lot of your team. So shout out to them. I know how hard they work, but they really are digging in and figuring out, hey, what do our leaders need out there today? So my last plug is that leaders, you got to take advantage of this. This is free. This is free stuff, and you got to take advantage of it. And you do so much more than just day of learning, obviously. And so that's where I wanted to. My next question was going to be, what are some other tools and resources that leaders can take advantage of for their own development today?
All right, Kenny, I'm going to do a plug. You've been doing plugs. I'm going to plug Magenta University.
Yes.
You can just type Magenta University in your T Nation search box. You can also type Day of Learning in your search box. Day of Learning is on the Magenta University T Nation site. And the one plug I want to make on Day of Learning is if you go to the Day of Learning site, there are replays and all the leader guides and all the content for the last 3 years. There's 2020, 2021, and the one we just had in 2022. So when you put it all together, it covers a robust set of skills. And customer obsession is one that we had last year that's still relevant.
Relevant.
Innovation, still relevant. And I go back and use the lessons I learned from those almost on a regular basis, weekly basis. So, where else can leaders go? Magenta University. We have been working really hard to make it easy and simple, one place to go to help you grow your career. Magenta University. On the homepage, it is organized with tabs of if you're an individual contributor, if you're a manager or executive, and if you are looking for individual contributors aspiring to be managers, like we talked about, perform the job before you have it. We this year just launched Leader Shift. You go to the individual contributor tab, and Leader Shift is a great resource. We also have our Franklin Covey site that's accessed there, and there is a virtual mentor online program where, if you don't know where to start, it helps you how to manage yourself, you manage your team, manage your business. It gives you one-on-one guides. I mean, it every leader should be leverage it in some way, shape, or form. For managers, if you go to the manager tab within Magenta University, I'll just highlight a couple of things, but we have 3 things within our Magenta Manager program. For new managers, there's an onboarding resources. For current managers and anybody, there are toolkits that are on demand. And then lastly, we have some virtual instructor-led training with some mastery courses. One thing that one of our Day of Learning speakers shared is leadership. You never arrive. Leadership, you never arrive,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it's a bit exhausting because you have to work to just keep getting better.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and if you have that mindset, tools that maybe you would feel like, you know what, I've been a leader for 15, 20 years. I don't need to go back to the basics. You would be surprised at some of the habits we form over time aren't all good habits. And that refreshing, going back to the basics, picking up some nuggets, that's something that I just have to keep working on because I'm never going to get there. I'm never going to be this leader that does it all. That's not the goal. It's just to keep getting better.
Wow. That's a great segue into my last question for you. But before that, I have two of my people in leadership, and I have to tell you, both of them in our first sync ups after said, "Boss, this is a lot of work." I was like, "Oh man, okay, it's no, don't change a thing. I'm learning so much." And again, they're in class all day, and so they're doing a lot of this either very early in the morning or later in the afternoon, evening. But they're learning so much, and I can't stress this enough. This is all free. Think about what I would have to pay for a Franklin Covey course if I went outside the company, and I have all of it right there at my disposal. So thank you for that. Just outstanding, and I'll post some links when I post our talk so that leaders can find it very very easily by listening to your talk. My last question for you: you mentioned that as a leader you never arrive. What are some other things that you do that Barb does for her own development?
One of the things that try to start with on a daily basis is that self-care. If you aren't taking care of yourself, you can't serve others. And I did this morning, got up early, got the workout in, went to the gym, and that's one of the things that I do to help and support me from a leadership standpoint. I usually have about a 20-25 minute block of time between coming back from the gym before what I call the world awakes, like the house, everybody else wakes up in the house. So I try
Yes.
to use that time, for sometimes I'll listen to a podcast or read something, the news. This morning, I talked to my sister on the phone, just something that's a personal investment time for me before the day gets going. Other things that I do more from a development standpoint is schedule time. Uh, if you don't schedule time and then you have to defend the heck out of it doesn't happen. Back to the
Mm,
biggest barrier is time. A few things that we've done within our VP organization is on Fridays, we've tried to allow Fridays to be less meeting heavy days so that you can invest in maybe I want to work on building my network or I want to, attend a session or, you know, watch something that I've got in, that will help me from a development standpoint. And then on top of that, within my team, we are taking um, kind of this first Fridays. So, Fridays typically lighter meeting days if we can. And then the first Friday every month, we call it our innovation day, where we really are diving in and dedicating to development, innovative things, and just trying to give people permission and that scheduling of time.
wow, that is so awesome. Barb, I could talk to you all day. I've learned so much. First, it's been great to learn a lot more about you, and I feel like I've known you for a long time, and now I really feel like I know you. But I knew that this source of inspiration came from somewhere, and what a place that it comes from with you. Thank you so much for everything that you do for our leaders out there, and for really everybody in our company to really continue to drive the innovation when it comes to learning. It's just so important, for us. So I'm gonna hit you back up maybe a little bit later in the year, maybe right either before or after the next day of learning. So maybe you can give some more plugs on that, and we could talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks for having me, Kenny. It's been a joy.
Awesome. Well, folks, please share the heck out of this. For now, this has been Kenny and Barb with the Yak with Mac. We will talk to you real soon.